And we are live again on episode 5 of this Hall of Fame series. And today I've got two of my absolute favorite Bitcoiners on the show. I've got Gigi again. The dude won't leave me alone, man. He's like a biological thing that keeps clinging on to me. And then I've got Brandon Quittem, the man himself. So, gents, I'll let you guys do a quick introduction, and then on this episode, which are we going to call it Bitcoin and biology, or are we going to call it Bitcoin as a living organism? I don't know. I don't care. Anyway, throw it over to you guys to introduce yourselves quickly for everyone.
Go ahead, Gigi.
I'm surprised that you didn't say that I'm like a ghost that is haunting you and haunting your dreams, because that would have been fitting as well.
That's probably more accurate. I'm dreaming about Gigi every night.
So yeah, I'm here because I wrote about Bitcoin as a living organism quite a while back, building up on Brandon's work. And yeah, I just fell down the Bitcoin rabbit hole hard. And I think it's one of the most fitting ways to think about Bitcoin and the most useful frameworks. So I'm excited to talk about that.
Absolutely. I might just quickly interject there. My favorite article, and correct me if I'm wrong with the name, or one of my favorite articles that I've ever read is Proof of Life. Was that sort of your first one that was more like with a biological bent, or?
Yeah, it was the first one that was exclusively with a biological bent. I had some others like Bitcoin's Gravity that spoke about similar ideas, but yeah, that one was comparing it to actual life. But I think we'll get into that in detail later.
100%. If the listeners listen to this, like seriously, that is one of the best articles. Like it's one of the ones that I always it's on my top recommend list. So yeah, incredible stuff. Glad to have you on, bro. Brandon.
Yes. So I got into mushrooms or mycology about a decade ago, and I got in it through foraging and food and also psychedelics. And then I sort of fell into the Bitcoin sphere in 2017 and sort of mapped mycology and Bitcoin together. And that led to a 4-part article series, which I now call the Mycelium of Money, which sort of just breaks down how Bitcoin shows up like a living organism, most specifically in the fungi kingdom. And we're going to talk about a lot of that stuff today. In terms of Bitcoin as a living organism, I agree with Gigi here. I think that's one of the best framings because, it's not just money, it's not software, it's not technology. Instead, it's all these different parts together. And the emergent thing that comes out of this actually does look like a living organism. And so I guess I'll take the opportunity here just to frame up the conversation as I see it. And starting with this, like, how is it possible that an anonymous founder, Satoshi, could just simply release software to the public? And then this software goes on to replicate itself, used by millions of people after only 12 years. And now it has a reasonable chance to replace the entire financial operating system of our species. And the answer of how that's possible is because Bitcoin's alive, or at least it appears to be. And it might not be alive like, our monkey brethren are, or like we are, but instead it might follow just some natural laws of mathematics relating to search optimization and networks. And this sort of algorithm for optimization, which we could say is the force behind evolution, it's manifested in many forms. And we can see this through the network of ants. We can see this in our brain and neurons, the internet of servers, mycelium, et cetera. These networks sort of define society. It's a different type of intelligence than like a central processing unit. And sort of these unique set of conditions and laws that gave birth to the universe are the same ones that drive biology and chemistry and markets. And it's all of the same thing. And Bitcoin is as well. And before we get into some of the things that Gigi and I and you, Alex, have been thinking about, I think it's important to recognize that this is not a new thing. Like, we're standing on the shoulders of giants here. Ralph Merkle famously described Bitcoin as a living organism. And I think that's still one of the best quotes of Bitcoin. Like, it's a new form of life that lives and breathes on the internet. It can pay people to keep it alive, et cetera. Andreas used the leafcutter ant analogy, which is like a super organism, also very nice. The honey badger, obviously, Gigi's proof of life. The Giga Chad brought in cyber hornets. And so there's a lot of different angles here. And yeah, I'm just looking forward to break this down with you guys. I woke up today like it's Christmas to have this conversation. I was so excited.
Awesome, man. Look, I think I'm gonna pull a thread of what you were mentioning there to sort of kick us off here. Did you have something to mention there, or?
I had something just very quickly, like
Shoot, yeah.
obviously the Merkel quote is insanely beautiful and was very prescient at the time. Like
Yes.
it was quite a while ago that he said that, and I think we can see that play out now. And the question that like poses itself is Bitcoin really alive? Or are we just like making this stuff up? But when you start researching the characteristics of life and trying to decide if something is living or not, it's really fucking difficult. Like it's really difficult to pin down what is actually living and what is not. Like, are viruses alive, for example? If viruses are alive, like some biologists say they aren't, some say they are. It depends if you are a virologist, I guess. But if they are alive, then what about computer viruses? You know, like they have very similar characteristics. Like they multiply. They have like an instinct of keeping themselves alive. They can't live without computers, which are their hosts, and so on and so forth. And there are other phenomena in our universe that have similar characteristics and that also have like self-organizing structures, like crystals, for example. And it's really not that easy to just say, okay, this is alive and this isn't. And especially if you look outside of our very well-known DNA-based life. And so when you go through the list of what makes something a living thing, if like Bitcoin ticks all the boxes. And what I basically came to the conclusion of is very similar to the question that Turing asked with the Turing test. Like, how can you judge if something is intelligent? You know, like you can't really solve the problem of the philosophical zombie. So if you act like you're an intelligent autonomous agent, then I have to assume that you are. Like, I might be speaking with simulations of you guys, I might be speaking with robots, I might be a brain in the vat. Like, this problem is pretty much unsolvable. And I think it's kind of similar with life as well, in terms of, if you see an alien life form, like if we discover alien life somewhere else and it behaves as if it is living, but it's very different. Like, let's say it doesn't use something that approximates the DNA code that we know so well from Earth. But if it grows, if it reproduces, if it replicates, if it tries to keep its inner structure, then I think the only reasonable judgment that we can make is, yeah, it's a very alien thing, but it seems to be alive. And this was my judgment that I made of Bitcoin. And I think it's not outlandish what Ralph Merkel said. So I just think it's the best way to think about what's going on right now. So yeah, that's what I wanted to add.
No, dude, seriously, I was writing some notes here before when Brandon was talking, and I wrote down Turing, and the fact that you mentioned it is like we're totally on the same wavelength. It reminds me of that same idea of the Turing test, and you know, how do you really differentiate between perceived intelligence and real intelligence, and what is perceived and what is real. So it's a really interesting concept. The piece that I was going to talk about earlier, or that I was going to pull the thread on, is just this idea of how many different variations there are on framing Bitcoin. You know, like, I mean, I think most people out there have, I guess, at the most rudimentary level, framed it. I mean, maybe we start at framing it as tulips, and then, you know, framing it as a Ponzi, then framing it as an asset class, you know, framing it as an investment, you know, digital gold, etc. And that sort of framing seems to chunk up. You know, you've got money, which I think is quite a broad framing. You know, then you can sort of go to this idea of like a universal physical constant. You know, I started writing an article ages ago saying, you know, B is the new C. You know, in sort of relation to the speed of light being this physical constant that we can use. And for the first time in history, in the complexity of an economic framework, we now have a constant that we can relate back to. And then you sort of chunk up further. You know, you've got a lot of, I mean, me, Jimmy Song, and Jordan Bush were on a podcast the other day discussing Bitcoin as a, you know, almost, they kind of call it as a gift from God. So I think, you know, from a Christian standpoint, they sort of perceive it as this tool that embodies what they might define as God. But, you know, one could also argue that it is, you know, in some sense is a manifestation of God. But my one of my favorite framings truly is this framing of something that is alive. And yeah, I just think of all of the ways to look at it, for me, this is one of the most profound and empowering and important ways to look at something like Bitcoin, because of life's nature as something that's emergent, complex, bottom up, not necessarily something that is top down and apparently given. Like, and in some ways, yes, yeah, one could argue Bitcoin was given, but it had every chance of failing. But it seemed to have been picked up by people, and it emerged as this thing that became alive over time. So I'll throw this over to whoever wants to sort of pick up from that thread, and let's see what rabbit holes we fall down.
Yeah, I have one thought. I think the reason why it works so insanely well, and also why Bitcoin can be seen as a life form, is the whole idea of Bitcoin, like the whole design of Bitcoin, the whole reason why it exists is to build something that they can't stop, no matter who they are. So it is built for survival, and it is built for self-preservation. And that's basically what life does as well. So that's why you also see the same characteristics. I just have one comment to what you said for the B equals C idea. I really like that. I think I even have like one paragraph in one of my articles where I mentioned that as well. That is, it truly is like the difficulty adjustment is truly of Einsteinian proportions, because it behaves also very similarly to the speed of light limit, because with relativity, no matter how hard you try to get close to the speed of light, it, like if you expand more energy, if you put more energy into it, it will always get harder. Like you will acquire more mass, and like you will never reach it completely. Like the more energy you put into it, the higher the difficulty adjustment gets, so to speak. Like in the physical universe as well. And Bitcoin, it's the same way. Like the more energy you put in, and the harder you try to mine it, the relativistic effects kick in, and then it gets harder to mine, and you will never reach it. Like you will never mine all the Bitcoins completely in like one go. It will always kick in, and you will always have to deal with the relativistic drag, so to speak.
That is such a powerful point, actually. Holy crap. So I think anyone out there who has been told about the whole quantum computing is going to break Bitcoin and all that sort of stuff, therein lies the basically the rebuttal or the rejection of this idea that quantum computing will somehow make mining and stuff like that obsolete. It's actually fundamentally false, because we have this practical relativistic bound, this upper bound that the more like, all it will do is just increase the difficulty of mining Bitcoin. It's simple as that. So yeah, I hadn't even thought about that. That's really, 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 really powerful.
Yeah, it's a nice parallel. But I also want to loop back really quickly to the different ways to look at Bitcoin, like the different framings that we already had. And I think this will also continue to evolve. I think new kind of ideas will pop up. But what I like the most, I think, is that Bitcoin itself is an idea. So one of the framings is that the idea of Bitcoin existed even before a working implementation was there. And even if Bitcoin would fail, like the idea would still be there, like it's the meta idea of separating money from state, and the meta idea of having like money in cyberspace is something that, now that we know it's possible, I think just no matter what, it won't go away. Like even if we would have any catastrophic failure or anything like that. But I think, like I'm currently writing my second book, 21 Ways, which goes through 21 of these framings. And there are just so many. I had like a list of 50, and I had to compress it down to like 21. And you can look at Bitcoin, to stick with the idea metaphor, for example, as pure information, which is also true. You can look at it as a game, in the sense of like an infinite game that you can participate, and everyone wins, so to speak. You can look at it from like parallel economy perspective, so that we are creating a parallel economy and everyone is free to join. You can look at it from the scarcity perspective, like we never had digital scarcity, we never had absolute scarcity for that matter. I really also like the framing of like the truth machine and so on and so forth. Like there's so much to unpack, but again, I think what it comes down to at the root is that Bitcoin, that the goal of Bitcoin, so to speak, is survival at all costs. That's why security and decentralization is like of the most paramount importance. You know, like if you lose decentralization, you lose survival. That's basically it. And so all the trade-offs that Bitcoin makes are geared towards survival. And the sooner you understand that, the sooner it will also become clear that all quote unquote competing projects are not really competing with Bitcoin, because they are not competing in the survival space. Like if you can snuff out the other projects, then it's not a competition for Bitcoin, because it's about surviving.
So true. I really want to dig into the survival thing, but before we go into there, I think just this idea of survivability and continuation as effectively the best definition we could almost give to life, because life is this thing that continues. And this is, I think, where people sort of get mixed up with, like you just said, describing other coins and other things like that, is Bitcoin's decentralization as an idea or as a concept or as a thing is actually aligned with life, because all life is decentralized. And life, I was discussing this on the podcast the other day with Jimmy and Jordan, and I was trying to explain that I don't necessarily believe in a God, but I believe in this almost blind force that we call life, which is this thing that just continues forward. And it experiments, it grows, it expands. For every 10 things that it does, 8 might fail, 2 might succeed. And from those 2, another 20 emerge. And then, of those 20, 15 might fail, 5 might. So it's this thing that continually experiments and expands and grows. And we seem to be this sort of at the cutting edge of life's experimental process. And, in our hubris or in our ignorance or arrogance, we kind of think that, we know better, and we can kind of take this complex process of life and compartmentalize it and put it into a box and effectively take the life out of life. And my argument with that is, we'll most likely not stop life. Life will continue. We'll just make an evolutionary example of ourselves. But I just love this concept of life and survivability. But before we go into that, I think we'll dig into that at some point. I want to throw it over to Brandon just to sort of talk about how that relates back to, some of the things he's worked on with mycology, and just this idea of how life itself, and I think mushrooms are a perfect example here, is just spreads. It doesn't narrow. It spreads and it continues to grow. And I think that is one of the most important ideas of life, which is why I think also that relates back to how Bitcoin is a life form in itself, because it just spreads and grows. But anyway, Brendan, over to you.
Yeah, definitely. So you guys brought up so many good points. I'm going to have to address a few before I get to that question.
Sure.
One, with regards to framing, my favorite way to describe Bitcoin in this angle is the snow crash quote, which everyone should read that book if they haven't. But the quote is, "This snow crash thing, is it a virus, a drug, or a religion?" And then the person responds, "What's the difference?" And that's kind of like what Bitcoin is. It's a mental virus. It's a drug. We can't get enough of it. We're drawn to it. It feels like the truth. We're all hopelessly addicted degenerates, just Bitcoin junkies. It's also a religion. We worship it and we put it on a pedestal like it is the truth. And so, to normal people listening to this, if you find yourself here, we're all normal. Don't worry. Okay, next thing.
God, these crackpots.
Yeah, exactly. The next one that you brought up was about survivability and regards to Bitcoin and alternatives. And I think that's a really important point, because to a layman, they see Bitcoin and they just think it's a blockchain and blockchains are magic. So this other blockchain has cooler features, so they're apples to apples. But that's just not true, right? Bitcoin was designed to survive forever. And I like the framing of the Great Filter, which is an idea about where is life in the universe. And there's all these hospitable planets. Why haven't we seen more life? And the idea is that as life develops, there are these really hard points. Like maybe it goes from single cell to multi-cell. Maybe that's a really hard jump. Or maybe it's really easy to colonize your own planet, but getting off your own planet is really hard. And so life hits a dead end there. And so there's all these theoretical points where life would disappear, and those would be great filter events. Mm-hmm. And in the cryptocurrency space, although I hate saying that, I would say the great filter is a state level attack. So if you cannot survive an attack like that, then your cryptocurrency is pointless from the beginning, because you're always going to be an experiment. And once you become relevant geopolitically, you're gone. And as far as I can tell, Bitcoin is the only thing remotely close, even standing a chance against a state level attack. The rest is dead on arrival. And so let's not waste energy there. Let's focus on the one single best shot we have, and let's not screw this up. That's my thought there. And now to get to your final question there about anti-fragility and mycelium and how this thing is, drawing on Gigi's work a bit, life is a process. It's not a thing. It's always happening. And I think mycelium demonstrates this extremely well. And if you're unfamiliar with fungi, mycelium or fungi, is its own kingdom. There are more species of fungi than plants and animals combined. And it's a criminally studied area. It honestly holds the secret or the wisdom
criminally
to solve.
Studied or criminally understudied?
Oh, sorry, understudied.
Okay.
Yeah, good catch. Mycology is put in the basement of the horticulture or the plant biology sections in universities, where really fungi are in charge. They're far more important to our ecosystem than any other organism. And so I think in the future, we'll realize our errors here, and we will start dumping more resources here. It's already starting, but the S-curve's just starting. Anyways, so mycelium is this underground root structure. You can think of it like a single-celled, wall-thick underground network. It transports resources, information. It connects all the trees together. It acts as a security system for the forest. And it facilitates trade across species lines. Why would a big oak tree send resources to a baby birch tree next door when, traditionally we would think they're competitive? But no, together they're stronger. And so it brings up the question of maybe a forest is actually should be viewed more like as an ecosystem or a single organism. Like the forest is a single organism because it's so cooperative. And maybe a cooperative forest outcompetes just a single tree. And so you can see how it would develop towards this symbiotic ecosystem. That's a roundabout tangent to get to an idea called economic Darwinism, which is that the best way to survive is the ability to adapt. It's not just about survival of the fittest. You have to be able to evolve and change based on your environmental stimulus. And that's what creates anti-fragility. You have new stressors, you learn, you advance, you grow, and now you can tackle new challenges. And so I think that's what's the most interesting about Bitcoin is it started as one thing. And yeah, the core idea hasn't changed much, but through environmental stressors, it evolves, right? Okay, the base layer cannot reach as many transactions as we need. So Lightning Network appears, right? There's all these examples. There's a software bug. Information travels through the network, it gets updated. And so it's constantly learning. And that's the process that's needed in order to stay anti-fragile. I'll stop there.
I wanted to dig into sort of the Darwinism quote there, because again, this I put out the podcast with Jimmy and Jordan today, and I got a lot of feedback from some Christians on Twitter, and they were like, oh, this is a very how do you in a Darwinist world or from the evolutionary standpoint, like how do you justify morality, for example, and not just going and blowing someone else up or the strongest person taking over? And I think you made a good point there about Darwinism is not about survival of the fittest or survival of the strongest, which, I mean, one could argue that strongest and fittest is just a relative term anyway. But I think Darwinism or the idea of evolutionary progression is survival of the most adaptable, or you could say survival of the most survivable. Which I think is a better interpretation of what Darwinism is, or what I call in alignment with life, because life is that which continues. That's sort of the best definition I've been able to give to this idea of life. And that which continues is that which experiments and does both things that allow it to continue and things that don't allow it to continue. And that's sort of how it navigates this experimental thing we call existence. But I think that's such an important distinction there, is because the religionists misinterpret Darwinism as just who's got the most guns or who's the most violent or something like that, which I think is really just, it's a very naive way to look at how life itself evolves. But do you have any sort of thoughts to add on that as an idea? Or Gigi, whoever.
Yeah, I would just say, to put a bow on that, you're absolutely right. Darwin is misunderstood. He also has a quote like, survival of the fittest through tooth and claw or something like that. And I don't even know if he said that, but that's the one that people remember. It's like this gruesome, like it's like a gladiatorial arena of species hacking it out, trying to survive. And the modern science that we're finding now is we're finding symbiotic relationships all throughout the ecosystem. And they have different types of symbiosis. Like a parasite is technically symbiosis, or it can be like mutually beneficial, or it can be like, hey, we have shared interest, so let's trade together because 1 + 1 = 3. And we're seeing these examples all throughout. Like, for example, mushrooms right now, they mine minerals underground. Essentially, they use chemistry to digest their environment externally underground. So think of digesting a rock to liberate nitrogen, phosphorus, potassium. And these are valuable minerals from which the fungi can trade with trees. The trees produce sugar through photosynthesis, and they give that to the mushrooms in exchange for these minerals. And the latest sciences they're observing is fungi will mine some minerals over here, then it will scan the market trying to find a good price. It will skip the tree who's selling low and go over here and get a good price. And so these market systems, it is 1 + 1 = 3 in the forest. And you can see that as sort of competitive, but it actually produces wealth through that trade and through that specialization. And that seems to be fundamental in biology. And we're just now starting to pay attention to this.
I love that concept. I absolutely love that concept. I think that one of the key words there is this idea of symbiosis, is that's existence is in itself symbiotic. And, that does not preclude the possibility or the existence of kind of tyrannical, religionist sort of viewpoint of Darwinism, because that does exist. There is, life forms, or there is periods, or there is opportunities to go and take through theft and through force and through violence and all that sort of stuff. That doesn't preclude that. But what happens is that only lasts for so long because it's not aligned with life. There is far more to gain from a living organism through symbiotic relationships, as opposed to, I guess, call it consumatory relationships, where it consumes the other, and then it doesn't exist. So I think that's such a powerful, important point for people to hear out, particularly economically speaking as well. Gigi.
I think one way to think about it, I really liked what you said, that life is the thing that continues. And what I like to, I also like the framing of finite and infinite games. And by definition, life is an infinite game. And every working relationships and working symbiotic relationships are infinite games. It's not about like who is winning in the end. And in the end, you have like a gladiator arena. There's like one victor and everyone else is dead. Like that's not a process that can continue. That's not that's the definition of a finite game. Like if you win at the end and then that's it. And then the game starts anew. That's not what life is. And that's also not what healthy markets are. And that's also not like, as Brandon said, like in the forest, that's not how it works. Like it's not, you don't have like one organism that just kills everyone and everything in the forest, and then you have like one entity left, and then that's it, and this guy will starve to death. I mean, like that's that's by definition unstable. And so I think we see that. We see that in Bitcoin as well. And I also liked what Brandon said before with how life is learning and how Bitcoin is also learning and adopting. And I think one very interesting comparison is how life is learning with gene transfer, and there is horizontal and vertical gene transfer. Like you can like, there's so much information and learning embedded in our DNA, and the same is true for Bitcoin. Like it's very different building blocks, but Bitcoin builds up on so many different layers, like transportation protocols from the internet, like how every library that is below the meta idea of Bitcoin, all the encryption, all the mathematics that was built before it. That's like the very basic building blocks of every living thing on Earth. That's also like, like those are the very old core libraries, haven't been touched in, I don't know, like in computer science, it's like 30 years. That's a long time. With evolution, it's of course millions of years. But I think it's helpful to think along these lines as well. And with horizontal gene transfer, if we saw that in the Bitcoin space as well. Like there were some features that were activated in other cryptocurrencies, and Bitcoin adopted those. I mean, like some say it was an expensive testnet, but even if there is like an interesting idea somewhere else, Bitcoin can definitely learn from that and absorb that. And that's very similar to horizontal gene transfer, where you have some like you don't have to do all the evolutionary steps yourself. You can just incorporate it by mating or by some other means. And I think it's very, very helpful to think of those living software systems in that way, because what the software is doing as well is learning. It's learning how to best survive in Bitcoin's case. If there is an attack vector, it has to learn how to defeat it. And Bitcoin in particular does that by patching itself, and it pays software developers to keep it alive and patch itself. Like Ralph Merkle said as well, like it pays humans to keep it alive. And this is true for miners, this is true for software developers, this is true for other people. And it's just, I think it's such a helpful framework to think about what's going on, because it's profoundly true, in the same way that it's profoundly true that a forest itself is like a living organism, and the components of the forest help each other and are communicating with each other and are in symbiosis with each other. And the same is true for Bitcoin. And for Bitcoin, as far as I can tell, the components, I think in my article, I outlined the 4 components as well, which is the ideas, people, code, and nodes. And in the sense, like the ideas that the people have, they instantiate those ideas in code, and the code is executed on the nodes, and the nodes create the network, and the network reaches consensus, and the consensus is actually what brings the value. And all in turn, it reinforces the ideas. Like if something works, then the ideas gain high attraction, more value. And in Bitcoin, for example, like the very meta idea of Bitcoin, as far as I'm concerned, is that the rules were set in stone, as Satoshi said, at the beginning. Like the rules are set in stone with version 0.1, and that's it. So the meta idea of Bitcoin is that there are no hard forks, because a hard fork is like a rule change, and so we see that this has worked for more than 10 years now. And I think the most important time of Bitcoin's history up to now was the block size debate and was the user activated soft fork, because that cemented that the meta idea is the most important one, and that Bitcoin will not fork itself for like completely stupid features. And so to bring it back to living things, I think also the meta idea of life, for example, is incremental process. You don't go back to the drawing board, because whatever works, it doesn't even matter why it works. From a survival perspective that it works, so we won't change it. Like that's kind of the meta idea. And I see very similar things in Bitcoin as well. And I think it's just very interesting that you have those learning characteristics in biological life forms with gene transfer, horizontal and vertical gene transfer. And you have very, very similar phenomena in this cybernetic life form, in this like Bitcoin in cyberspace. And it learns also horizontally and vertically, like everything, like all the software iterates, and you can also integrate useful parts from other software projects.
Indeed. For the record, when Gigi is talking about horizontal genes transfer and mating, he's not advocating bestiality. I promise. Just putting that one out there. I'm kidding.
One comment
man.
on.
Go.
I was say one comment on horizontal gene transfer is that fungi do this all the time. So you can think of like two organisms in one ecosystem, and one organism is about to die. They're losing a food source or they're being attacked or whatever. And so what they can do is they just slurp up genetic material from organisms in their ecosystem, hoping that this new information gives them an advantage so that they can survive. And we have tons of examples of this now. And with all the studies now in the gut microbiome, which appears to be sort of like the key to human health, is we have this gut, which has billions or trillions of other different cells, different life forms, bacteria, viruses, fungi, they all live in us. And this ecosystem is vibrant, and it's what produces most of our neurochemistry. It provides our immunity. It helps us digest food. It's pretty much everything. And so we evolved with these other organisms, and we slurp up genetic information from them constantly. That's one thing that viruses do. It's sort of like an information interface between other organisms and these very small viral information packets. And so that is what life is. And to bring this to Bitcoin in a second here, actually, when we evolved from single cell to multicellular organisms, what happened was we absorbed the mitochondria, which is if you remember from 8th grade biology, that's the power plant of the cell, right? And what that is it's old biology that got absorbed by a larger cell. It sort of just hijacked this power plant so that the organism that absorbed it has a new feature. And that's how all of life evolved. And speaking of incremental progress, there's a law called Gall's law, which states that if you want to build a complex system, first you have to start with a very simple system that works, and then iterate, right? And that's what Bitcoin is. Bitcoin is a very simple system. Make sure it works. Okay, let's harden it. Now let's add on new layers. That's how all of biology is. So we have the single cell that absorbs, and then you have these organs, and then you have systems in a body, and then that zoom out even more, and you have the full body. And so that iterative, modular, scalar approach, that's what life does. And so the idea that, to bash on Ethereum for a second, the idea that you can just design this uber complicated super machine from day one, that's never going to work. There's always these gaps that you don't understand, and it's going to fail. Instead, you need to start simple and build. And then Ethereum 1.0 doesn't work. Surprise, surprise. So they double down and they make it 10 times as complicated for Ethereum 2. And who knows what these systems will become, but they're defying biology. They're defying laws of nature to try to produce these. And so why would you want to put any, like the idea that can succeed is such a wild idea that it shouldn't be worth much of our energy. And so let's focus on what is true to nature, which is Gall's law, which is Bitcoin, and let's crush that.
It's actually beyond wild. It's just arrogant, because it reminds me of the idea of a statist utopia. It's like you know how it all should be, and you think you can create, like you think you can create something complex enough to work, whereas in reality, life is infinitely complex, and it sort of finds its own way. There's to step back a moment. There was something you mentioned there, which just I had an epiphany. This idea of how the mitochondria was absorbed by the larger cell in our own emergent evolutionary process as living organism, as a living organism, and that relating back to Bitcoin is, I just wrote a note here, is Bitcoin is absorbing all the ideas that came before it. So like you could almost imagine Bitcoin absorbing, proof of work, absorbing even things like the internet, TCP/IP, cryptography. Like it's absorbing these things that work, and they're becoming part of this larger, complex living system in a sense, in much the same way we have emerged through absorbing these other biological, call it primitives even, or these biological, you could argue steady, complete building blocks of biology, and we kind of absorbed each of them along the process. So in many ways, Bitcoin's done that with everything.
Yeah,
And you know,
absolutely.
now it's absorbing money, it's absorbing gold, it's absorbing everything. It's absorbing all of our fucking minds and all of it.
Absolutely. And if you study Bitcoin's prehistory, like, for example, all the papers that are linked in the white paper, you can see how profoundly true that is. Like, for example, the trustless timestamping schemes, or the mostly trustless timestamping schemes that were tried before it, they already had the concept of chaining data together, so you cannot just go back arbitrarily and change something. They also had other building blocks that Bitcoin uses, for example, combining two different hashes, so not one hash can be attacked. And in Bitcoin, this is still used, that you have like a SHA-256 hash, and that's hashed again with RipMD. And as you said, proof of work was also absorbed. Hashcash on its own, it worked, you know, like, and also how Finney's work with reusable proof of work, like all of this, those are the components, like those are the small working units that Bitcoin absorbed. And all of this worked. It just didn't scale particularly well. It was not like Bitcoin literally took, like, nothing in Bitcoin is new, except one could argue for the idea of the difficulty adjustment. Like that's the secret sauce that makes everything work. But everything else was already there. So it's really surprising that Bitcoin didn't appear sooner, so to speak. But it is literally like this Frankenstein technology of just throwing everything that was already there together and gluing it together with the difficulty adjustment. And Satoshi, like, to even like offend all the programmers and computer scientists, he glued it together in like one file, you know, like one file with a couple hundred lines of code, and it just, that's what we still kind of have, you know, like it's the same system. It's just the code base is now way larger, and everything it's done way better, and it evolved obviously, and we had soft forks and so on and so forth. But still, like we're still on the same chain. Like that's what generated the Genesis block. It's beyond belief. Like it's so crazy. And yeah, as you say, you know, like all these small working components, they were there already, and Bitcoin absorbed all of them. And we see it already that also if new ideas come along, for example, the idea of HD wallets, you know, like Bitcoin had no HD wallets, and we had no seed phrases, and we had no QR codes, for example. And the QR codes came completely outside of Bitcoin. So that's a perfect example of like a horizontal transfer, you know, like, oh, what if we air gap everything? Like we have no data transfer, but we only have it visually, and you just scan it, because typing it is very cumbersome, copy pasting it is cumbersome, and so on and so forth. And you just include the QR code for all these kind of interactions between buyer and seller and so on and so forth. And we see it continuing to happen with the Lightning Network and other things built on top, that all those ideas from other areas get absorbed. Everything that works gets absorbed. And I think it's such a beautiful phenomenon.
That's my mind is blown. This absorption idea, I think, is so powerful. It really is. I mean, that for me is almost like one of the most powerful components of the argument, or the most powerful arguments for Bitcoin as a life form. It just seems to continually absorb, and it's not only those incremental, the smaller chunks that become Bitcoin, but it's almost, you could argue that, you know, Bitcoin is going to absorb things like even the internet. Like it's going to absorb all of these things, like all the way down the stack, because they're part of, you know, there's a lot of Bitcoin, as I said, and I'm squarely in this part of it, is that Bitcoin is going to be far bigger than what the internet is. And you know, it's, you know, so some people have said, oh, Bitcoin is just the latest layer in the Bitcoin, in the internet stack, or in the stack of communication protocols in cyberspace. But you know, to some degree, I would say that Bitcoin is absorbing all of that, and that a lot of these things came for the purpose of enabling something like Bitcoin to exist today. Which I don't know if you guys have any thoughts on that.
I have so many thoughts on that, man. You're not ready for this.
I'm ready. I'm holding on.
Like, I completely agree. And it's what's interesting is, like, I wrote about that as well in the second article of my Proof of Life series, which was called Bitcoin's Habitats. And I went through the thought experiment of, like, where does Bitcoin actually live? You know, and it's not easy to tell, because it's you know, you could say it lives in cyberspace, but that's not entirely true, because it also, you know, it runs on nodes, and there's also this, like, social meat space layer that is still required and will probably be required for quite a while. And there's also the financial layer. Like, once Bitcoin went from 0 to 1, like, once it had some value, it entered the financial realm, and that's what I call fin space. So in my opinion, Bitcoin lives at the intersection of cyberspace, meat space, and fin space. And because it also, like, because everything is so intertwined, and just the game theory and the incentive structure to keep it alive and hold Bitcoin and so on and so forth is definitely intertwined with the financial space as well. So we saw, for example, when the coronavirus hit, and, like, the Black Friday, when we had the meltdown and just all the stock markets crashed and everything, Bitcoin crashed as well. So it's not independent from the rest of fin space, for example. It also is not independent from the rest of meat space. Like, if nuclear war would start and we lose half of the planet, then half of the Bitcoin network would go down as well. It wouldn't matter for Bitcoin, you know, but you can definitely attack the meat space infrastructure of Bitcoin. And so what I think is an interesting thought experiment is that it looping back to the idea of, was the internet made for Bitcoin, or is Bitcoin just a layer on top of the internet? I think Bitcoin will use whatever is most useful to it. Like, that's the logical conclusion. It is like, it is this living superorganism. And currently, like, since the internet is only used to pass information back and forth, and it's the best information tool that we have, so Bitcoin uses the internet. If the internet, for one reason or another, ceases to be the best tool to pass information back and forth, Bitcoin would use something else. Like, if we have, like, a satellite thingy, whatever, it doesn't matter. We see it already, you know, like, we have experiments going on with, I mean, with the Blockstream satellite. We have Rudolfo, who uses fucking radio waves to send Bitcoin transactions back and forth. And, like, if we also see it in terms of, you know, as living things do, you know, like the Jurassic Park meme, life finds a way. In the same way, Bitcoin finds a way. So if the internet gets shut down in one part of the world and people still need to use Bitcoin, they will find a way to interact with the network. Someone will have, like, a satellite dish, and someone has a way to relay information. And so to me, it's obvious that Bitcoin will use whatever information technology is best suited for its purpose. But for me, it goes even farther than that, because this is also true, for example, for mining. And we see that already, you know, like the general basic idea that Satoshi had was, like, one CPU, one vote. And Bitcoin was like, yeah, no, that's not good enough for me. You know, like, their graphics cards, their ASICs, like, I need more power, you know, like, I need, I need more energy. And the logical conclusion for me is that now, currently, the best way to feed on energy for Bitcoin is through humans. But in the future, in the far future, that's not necessarily the case. Still, like, you can definitely build autonomous mining farms, and you can there are ways to run these things where you can completely remove the humans from this loop, you know, like, the autonomous mining farm runs itself, and Bitcoin pays it directly. And maybe you need to do a little bit of maintenance, but if you look into robotics, then it's not out of the question that this will be automated as well. And so I think it's really funny to think that Bitcoin definitely has the power to transcend the internet, and it also has the power to transcend humanity in some sense, for some purposes, you know. And it's even true for writing code, you know, like, if you look into machine learning and, like, algorithms and biological algorithms that can write code and that absolutely produce very useful code, like, if in 100 years from now, like, I don't even think it would take that long, but just to be outrageous to drive home the point, I think, like, we could even outsource some of the software development and just let machines do it. And so Bitcoin, again, I think it will use whatever is best suited for the purpose. And currently, that's the internet. Currently, that's miners that, like, made out of flesh and blood that operate mining operations, and that's core developers and other software developers that are made from flesh and blood. But I don't think necessarily that this will stay the same in the future. So I love what I love to hear what you guys think about it.
I've got some
so
thoughts
much
on
there
this
I want to
one.
hit on, but yeah, Brandon, you go first. You go first. I want to. There's some pointy questions for me on my side as well, but yeah, Brandon, go ahead.
Okay. Amazing points there, Gigi. And my mind's racing so fast trying to take notes. I'm gonna have to think about this one. But a couple of initial thoughts. Number one, so mycelium, to bring it full circle. Mycelium is this underground network. It's been described as the Wood Wide Web. It's nature's underground internet, right? And Terence McKenna, famous writer, psychonaut, philosopher, he was saying that the internet will be run through mycelial networks one day. And you could translate this to Bitcoin as well. It uses it uses chemistry and electricity, combine that, and it sends information through this network. So theoretically, we could merge our silicon-based technology with carbon-based biology and create some sort of like, I create an electrical signal with a computer that plugs into a mycelial network. Information travels underground a mile through this network, pops out the other side, and we decode that signal. That's entirely possible. Now, I don't think our science is anywhere near ready, but that's not out of the question in the next 100 years. So just noodle on that for a second. Next one is on Bitcoin's appetite. That one really blew my mind. It's hungry for energy. It's hungry for people to do its bidding. It wants to be larger. It wants more efficient rails. All those things is true. And humans are, in a sense, just hijacked by the network to do its bidding. The miners are sort of indentured servants doing a service so they can get their meat and mead. And yeah, and so I think of this from the angle of the cordyceps, which is a type of mushroom that it's pretty sinister. What it does is it releases its spores, little mushroom seeds. They colonize oftentimes insects, and it grows inside these organisms. It connects to their central nervous system, and it takes over these insects and has them do their bidding. One common example is it takes an ant, hijacks their brain. It makes an ant climb as high as it possibly can on the tree, attach its mandibles to a leaf in a good spot, and then the mushroom consumes the insect from the inside out. Once it's dead, shoots a mushroom out the ant's head, and then releases spores from high up. Those spores rain down on the forest, infecting all kinds of other ants. And so we're like the ants being hijacked by this Bitcoin thing to do its bidding. And yeah, we get paid for it. Sure, it feels nice. It convinces us with all these different things to do its bidding. And to wrap this one up, this is a new thing in mycology. Less than 5 years ago, they discovered a new type of cordyceps in the Midwest. I think they found it in Ohio. And I'm going to get the details wrong. I haven't looked this up in a while. But it's a type of fungus that attacks a cicada. And what it does is it locks itself into the cicada's brain, and then it feeds it an amphetamine, so like speed or cocaine, and psilocybin. Okay, now you have these hopped up cicadas that are also tripping, and it turns the male genitalia into mush. And that mush is spores, which can then infect other organisms. So now you have these horny, tripping cicadas that are hopped up on amphetamines, flying around, humping everything that they see, man and women. It changes their sex. So they actually try to mate with other male and other female cicadas, spreading this disease. And everyone who gets humped by this hopped up cicada also gets the disease. And then they go on and spread it out. And so it's this diabolical strategy emerging through fungi. And yeah, I just had to bring that one up because I don't know what other podcasts I can bring that story up on.
So you're saying that's what Bitcoin, like you're saying that's what the orange pill is, right? Like
that's right.
It's gonna blow your brains out and turn your dick into it. This is great.
That's great. Yeah.
I have some comments about that as well. I don't know, Brandon, were you sort of finished up there? Or did you want to add some more stuff?
I don't think I can add anything on the back of that comment. I should pause.
That's so good. Like, but seriously, like anyone who's listening to this, look up videos and pictures of these zombie ants that are infected by mushrooms. Like it's some gore, crazy shit. Like, so
yeah.
I'm not sure if I can get behind the metaphor 100%. That's what Bitcoin is doing to us. It's a dark thought, but I'm not saying it's wrong. So
it's a scary one. Do you know what's funny? I was actually at a restaurant a few years back. This was probably early 2017 with a group of, I mean, back when I was, in the early days dabbling with altcoins and shitcoins and stuff like that. And there was a group of, crypto guys that I'd met. And it was funny because I was the first one to really start going hardcore Bitcoiner and, starting to sort of drag everyone across the line with me. But in the early days, like I was thinking about mining and like I had a bunch of GPUs and I was mining Ethereum and some other shitcoins and things like that. And I came up with this idea, which kind of is analogous to this idea that Bitcoin's using us. Is I thought, I wonder if Bitcoin was sort of developed, by some nascent AI and sort of planted here and using us to kind of help build infrastructure to the point where it's strong enough so that it kind of then subsumes us. And it was kind of, I don't know, maybe partly inspired by that movie Transcendence with Johnny Depp and stuff like that, but. I think, I don't know, I started writing a short story about that, like that, Satoshi was actually a nascent AI program and it's kind of using us in the process. Although, like you, Gigi, I'm not sure if I can 100% get behind that.
But you're not the first one who has ideas like that by far. Like there's the idea that Satoshi was a time traveling AI, and also I like the idea of Max Kaiser, who is basically saying that the Bitcoin network is doing a 51% attack on the world's
humanity.
energy, like on the world's energy production, because I think that's the first that's when Bitcoin actually has access to 51% of the energy that we produce. That's the first time that it can relax and feel safe, like that's basically literally the goal of Bitcoin. And so if there is actually a super intelligent sentient AI behind it, then we might be in some trouble because we might not have enough energy to stop it at that point. But I think it's hilarious to think as well that in the AI world there's this thought experiment of the paperclip maximizer. Like it doesn't matter what kind of machine you build. If it's really smart, it will find ways to reach its goal. So goals are really important. And if you build a machine that has just the task to produce a paperclip and is super smart about it, it will transmute like the whole solar system into paperclips, and we are just paperclip material. And I think it's so hilarious because that's basically what Bitcoin is doing. So in my eyes, Bitcoin is like the first paperclip maximizer, and we are all cheering it on, like, yeah, go ahead, more ASICs, just plug yourself directly into the oil fields and burn all this excess gas. And it's like it's a great idea that you can view Bitcoin as this one thing because it hijacked human minds, so to speak, because it is like this mushroom that implanted itself in us. But I think to bring it back to a more serious note, or not so sinister and dark, I think what's actually going on is this symbiosis. Like if you work with Bitcoin, if the only thing you can survive in the forest, for example, is if you enter into a symbiotic relationship with your environment. And Bitcoin is like the super organism in cyberspace. So if you want to survive, and again, like it's not only cyberspace, it's also cyberspace, meat space, fin space. So if you want to, especially if you want to survive in fin space in the next like 10, 20 years, you have to enter into a symbiotic 100%. Relationship with Bitcoin, because it's the best money we ever had and it will eat everything else up.
Yeah. So to your point there, I think that coming back to the symbiotic nature of Bitcoin and the symbiotic nature of life, I think those more sinister sounding things are unrealistic because I don't think they're compatible with life. It's like, this idea that Greta Thunberg was Satoshi is false. Like if she was, then, it may be the case that, Bitcoin wipes us out, but I just don't think that that's a reality. So like, I'm personally not a fan of this nerd utopia of a singularity where we, plug ourselves into some cyberspace VR and the physical meat space becomes obsolete. Like, cause I just, it's not just because I don't like it, but I just don't think that's entirely compatible with life. I think life is something that exists, on the physical and metaphysical planes. So the more, in some senses, we kind of build up the metaphysical or the cyber realm, the more space it actually ends up leaving for life to experiment in the physical space. So for me, like, I could even relate that back to the cordyceps thing. You know, cordyceps will have their own natural balancing mechanism because they're not going to blow up every single ant, because then there is no other way for it to spread. So it'll have its own natural symbiotic balancing mechanism. And I think that's what's important to understand here with any life form, in particular Bitcoin, is that, I mean, it's almost, you could relate it to the idea of if a tree falls in the forest and no one's there to hear it, did it fall? Like, so if humans aren't here, like, who really gives a fuck? So I think the symbiotic nature of, you know, Bitcoin being something that helps humanity. I'm actually writing an article which, fuck, so many relations here. So I'm calling it Bitcoin and the Great Filter, and I honestly believe Bitcoin is the thing that helps us transcend beyond the Great Filter. I think without Bitcoin, I think there's basically two outcomes for us. One is we nuke ourselves like the USSR did, or number two is we create some sort of fucking AI that makes us obsolete and we become, you know, servants or slaves. It's kind of like the Matrix future, which I think are effectively an example of not passing the Great Filter either way. But I think humanity gets beyond the Great Filter because we've got something like Bitcoin that brings us back to, you know, principles that are compatible or aligned with life as a process that continues and, you know, continues to flow forward. So I don't know if you've got any ideas around that, but I think there's a lot to digest there.
Brandon wrote at length about the Great Filter ideas, as far as I know, in the fourth part, right?
Yeah, I think the third part I touched on the Great Filter. The fourth part was all about symbiosis. If you have anything on the Great Filter, Gigi, you can jump in there, but I'd love to touch on symbiosis when it makes sense.
Go ahead.
Okay. I like what you're thinking there, Alex, about the Great Turning. I'm mixing up my recent article. The Great Filter being, we're at it now, right? And either we 100%. Adopt Bitcoin and we get over the hump, or we destroy ourselves. And I think that's actually a really, really powerful point. And in a sense, I think becoming a multi-planet, multi-rock species is a really good way to prevent ourselves from dying. So if we have a self-sufficient colony on Mars, the chance of us wiping ourselves out goes down a lot. And I think we can argue about whether we should go to Mars or not. It's a hard problem, but I don't think we have a chance of colonizing Mars if we don't have Bitcoin to sort of rein in the nonsense going on Earth. And it sort of unifies the planet around a common money with less externalities, which will harness untapped intellectual brain power that's just sitting on the sidelines in the world. It creates a more global economy. Everyone can participate, removes fiat waste, removes government control. All those things are prerequisites to building a more advanced society. And I'm point being, I'm very sympathetic to that idea. And to touch a bit on symbiosis, which was, again, part 4 of the Mycelium of Money series, I think this is a really, really important thing to think about. And I'll start with the historic analogy just to underline how important symbiosis is. So about 1.5 billion years ago, all life lived in the oceans. And so plants were just little floating algae, or maybe they attached themselves to the ground. Just to paint the picture, Earth and the land was just volcanic rock from all this eruption from Earth's core, creating little islands, which became continents, et cetera. And so no life really on Earth, on the surface. Then what happened was a fateful partnership between fungi and plants formed, and they partnered up and they colonized land. And what the plants do is they can create their own food. They're symbiotes. They accept the sun's energy and they produce food. And what fungi do is they mine minerals, and they're like anchors or root structures. So it depends on which perspective you look at. Essentially, fungi bolted on solar panels to their body so that they can combine together, go to land. And this process iterated over a long period of time. And the fungi essentially digested all this volcanic rock, liberating all these amazing molecules, which were then used by the plant. So that symbiosis occurred. Fast forward a long time, that led to complex life. And now if we fast forward today, we've gone through 5 different mass extinction events in our history. Think like a meteorite hits the earth, kills all the dinosaurs. Okay, almost everything dies there, but what survives? The fungi. So every time there's a mass extinction event, the fungi rebuild. And they have these unique anti-fragile characteristics to do that. Like they find their own food, so they're not reliant on the sun, and they're also collaborators, etc. And so what we also find is the organisms that partner with fungi, that form symbiosis with fungi, are the ones that come back stronger, and they're the ones who have the advantage. So one cool example, after the dinosaurs died with the asteroid, huge puff of smoke went up, blocked out sun for a very long period of time. Almost all the animals, almost all the animals, almost all the plants died, but a few survived. And what happened was it dropped the core temperature of the earth. And what that did was it made all cold-blooded organisms get attacked by fungi. But mammals are warm-blooded, so our bodies are warm enough that the bad fungi can't survive inside us. We have a fungal exclusion zone in our body, where cold-blooded dinosaurs, now that the sun's blocked out, it becomes colder, they're susceptible to fungi. Again, so mammals, warm-blooded things, partnered with the fungi and survived. And now you can look at ancient man 10,000 years ago. There's a famous example of Otzi the Iceman. It's a man crossing the Swiss Alps. They found his body practically perfectly preserved because it was so cold. And on this ancient man, they found multiple things. They found a necklace which had a fungi on it that's used for medicine and sharpening knives. So when it dries out, it's so sharp you can actually sharpen knives. And it's active against a parasite that he had in his body when they found him. And it had another mushroom called a tinder conch. And that tinder conch essentially keeps a spark alive for 3 days. So you have a mushroom, you hollow it out, and you just put a little spark in there. Now you can cross the fucking Swiss Alps with a little candle inside a mushroom and get somewhere else and create a fire. And if you didn't have that fire in the Swiss Alps, you're dead. And so what this shows us is that ancient man understood food, medicine, tools, transporting fire. All of that came from the mushroom kingdom. And so again, that was a long roundabout way to say Bitcoin is also like this mycelial structure that humans individually should form symbiosis with. Societies, businesses, countries should all form symbiosis with this thing because it's not going anywhere. It has advantages. It is the best money and it's consuming resources, and there's nothing we can do to stop it at this point. And if you look at what happens when individuals form symbiosis with Bitcoin, it actually does a lot of really positive things. People are more hopeful. You think more long-term. Oftentimes people report being healthier, probably because they're optimistic and they think long-term. We become better savers. All these things are just from forming symbiosis with this money, Ponzi scheme, tulip bubble, technology, whatever. And society is the same way. There's going to be countries that adopt Bitcoin, and they're going to have a divergent evolution with the countries that don't form symbiosis with Bitcoin. You can go down command and control China route, or you can adopt Bitcoin. One of them is a dead end, and that's China. So the countries that want to survive long-term need to adopt the future. And I think that's a kind of an interesting example with, to wrap this up, Darwin studied the Galapagos Islands. And the reason why he did that is because they used to be attached to land. So theoretically, let's say the same bird or the same turtle all lived on one continent, and then an island broke off. So that same turtle is now separated, and they can't mate with each other. So you have this island of evolution. And now on the Galapagos, they have all these unique species that are endemic to that region only. And that's part of how we discovered evolution. And same thing happens with plants and fungi. You have these plants form symbiotic relationships with fungi. And if you separate the same plant and you only give it access to one of its partners, one of its fungal partners, but not the other fungal partner, they actually evolve separately. And again, that analogy is perfect for individuals who adopt Bitcoin or who don't, or countries who adopt Bitcoin or don't. They're going to diverge in a loosely evolutionary sense, and there's going to be winners and losers. So form symbiosis with this thing, or you risk your own peril.
Yeah, I think even just to add a slight point there before I throw this over to Gigi, is this idea that nation states and countries and all of these sort of social constructs that we've built are our way as the human species of navigating the chaos of life and trying to make some sense and leverage our cooperative capacity, which is something that is quite unique to us in that sense. So so I think, you know, Bitcoin's going to change the very base of how we as a species are able to cooperate, collaborate, and how can I say, live and work together. So you know, I wrote in a recent piece this idea that the nation state is an evolutionary aberration. It's something that life, not even necessarily us, but life, the thing that flows through us all, is actually experimenting with, and it will, on a long enough time scale, be just one of those 8 things that failed in the 10 things that life attempted, because the nation state, by its very nature, seems to want to sanitize or sterilize the complexity out of life, which is antithetical to life. So I think that's to Brandon's point. I think that's the ability to, I guess, complement and, in a sense, become symbiotic with this thing that we can all observe and that we can understand its rules or its constitution is incredibly important and critical to our ability to move beyond this great filter. But Gigi, I'll throw it over to you, because I could sense that you wanted to add something to that.
Yeah, there are so many things to unpack there. To loop back what you just said in regards to nation states being kind of at odds with living things and the idea of for example, the idea that it's about the individual and the nation state being like a collective, like the it's an inherent contradiction. And I really like as you guys know, the framing of the sovereign individual, and it's insane how much of that was predicted already. So in the sense, it is the idea that once you have strong encryption, the nation state is basically doomed. And the last thing that was missing, like once you move into cyberspace, most of the economy into cyberspace, and most of the like we are having now discussions and just most of the things that are happening in a society, once you move it into cyberspace, in cyberspace you have unbreakable encryption, and this already removes a lot of power from the nation state. As we all know, the nation state derives a lot of its power from money and from the privilege of printing money and creating money out of thin air. And now we have something in cyberspace as well that removes this power from the nation state. And I think it's inevitable that the nation state will shrink, and that we will see the rise of the sovereign individual. And I think we can see that play out already. I mean, we see that just have a look around on Bitcoin Twitter. You see sovereign individuals left and right, and people fleeing their country because they just don't agree with the laws, and just making sure that they have at least like 4 or 5 passports. So shout out to Katie and just anyone who is like, you know, like farming passports. In Bitcoin, we're not yield farming, we're like passport farming. And to also loop back to what Brandon said before with Etsy, the mountain man who figured out how to use mushrooms properly. I think we see that in the Bitcoin space now as well. We see people figuring out how to use Bitcoin properly and how to use the inherent properties of Bitcoin to the advantage. And that's what Etsy did as well. You know, he found out that, okay, these kind of mushrooms, they have inherent properties that are super useful. I can sharpen my knife. I can transport an amber. I can cure diseases. I can get really high and have insights. I'm pretty sure this is what they did as well. And with Bitcoin, it's very similar. You know, like once you figure out that I can easily move a country because I just sell everything I have. I just put it all into Bitcoin, and like there's no friction there, you know. And also in terms of protecting your wealth, also in terms of just hiring people and just it removes so much friction. It's such a great tool that you can just transport value instantly. Like I always like the saying of, you know, like it's the super gold with teleportation built in. It's such a powerful tool, and once you understand that, and once you pick those parts out for yourself and build tools around that, like as I did with the mushrooms, you become insanely powerful. And everyone who does not do that, like everyone who does not enter symbiosis with this super organism, you will be left behind. It's just how it always was and how it always will be.
Mm-hmm. I think just to clarify the point about no friction is, the friction dissipates once you get into Bitcoin. I think that the friction of getting into Bitcoin is going to exist just by the very nature of the nation state or the power centers that exist today trying to sort of hold on, but I would argue that, much like what you were saying before about the sovereign individual thesis, is that, and I'm going to tie this back to the idea of life, is that I think one of the things that really, for me, that I really enjoyed about the sovereign individual was this idea of a move back to more fragmentation and localization. That really aligned with my personal values, I guess, as a libertarian, because, or, if I'm going to place a, individualist or, whatever label I'm going to place on myself there. But this idea that the nation state was this, experiment of life that was able to persist for so long because of the nature of collective violence, effectively, now is being overturned because of the gravity of something like strong cryptography, the gravity of being able to place the individual back at the locus of responsibility. And I was on a podcast yesterday with Valis and Ben Jarvi, and one of the things I mentioned was, I actually believe, like I call Bitcoin the renaissance of responsibility, is this idea that it's bringing responsibility back, and responsibility starts with the individual. And tying that back into life is that I think the reason why the nation state and these collective organizations are going to end up obsolete or be viewed as aberrations of nature or aberrations of life is that they centralize and they concentrate and they become fragile in the process. And for me, the way I view life and the way I view the anti-fragility of life and its ability to continue is this thing that is decentralized. It touches on our first point, like fragmentation is how life functions. And the more we deviate from this idea of fragmentation, experimentation, and survivability, the more the system itself becomes fragile, and it will fragment. Now, the only question is it going to fragment? Is it going to break up through our conscious, drive towards fragmentation and localization and decentralization? Or is the whole fucking thing going to fall apart and fall on top of us and fragment? Because at the end of the day, the gravity or the force of life, or the flow of life, you could call it, is towards fragmentation anyway. And we are just in a period of, I guess, incredible ignorance, hubris, and arrogance, that we think that we can somehow remove fragmentation or remove risk or remove the complexity that life comes with. And as I said in the beginning, is, in that process, all we're going to do is make an evolutionary example of ourselves of this is not the way to do it. And my hope is that Bitcoin is this tool, because it embodies these life compatible elements like decentralization, like fragmentation, etc. It'll then help us navigate towards a world, and this is my argument about us moving beyond the great filter with a tool like Bitcoin, absent which we wouldn't be able to move through it. It moves us towards a life or an existence that is, again, compatible with life and its decentralized, fragmented nature. And I hope that Bitcoin can sort of help us salvage as much of, I guess, humanity as possible, because these clowns that are the central planners, the bureaucrats, the intelligentsia, they're not going to succeed. The only thing they can do is either blow us all up or, make us obsolete in their naive attempts to build the next utopia, which is why, I think one of my favorite things about Bitcoin is its naturally fragmenting nature that is, again, in line with life and its fragmented nature.
So many good points there. To piggyback on that, like I see central versus decentral, or CPU, brain, nation state, fragility versus network, experiment, anti-fragility, etc. Those kind of two separate things. And we hit the peak nation state, and now it's either a pendulum swinging towards decentralization, or maybe we can say we're evolving towards decentralization. But to keep it with biology, I think you're right. Biology acts decentralized. You can think about how biological markets form underground with the mycelium trading resources. Humans create markets, and these things exist without planning. And so these emergent processes occur. And that's sort of, again, closer to life. And I think it's also better for the efficiency standpoint. And humans like to think that central planning is the way to go because we have these big brains and we're very good at logic and thinking. However, that central planning is obtuse to the rest of biology, like we mentioned. And fungi and Bitcoin do a good job of challenging the notion that intelligence must come from a brain or a central source, because instead mycelium and Bitcoin are these network intelligences. It's the sum total of all these individual agents acting in their own best interest at their own locus of control, making decisions based on what they have. And all that adds up together to create this emergent process. And that's important because it pushes the complexity to the edge of the network. And I think this ties nicely into where we're going with the sovereign individual thesis, which Bitcoiners talk about endlessly, but there's good reason for that. And I would like to tie it to an idea that Balaji brought up recently, which is about the digital nation state. And so going to the sovereign individual thesis, what shifted here is that defensive technology is now more potent than the existing offensive technology. So it used to be guy with the biggest army, the biggest military, the most aircraft carriers, whatever, they're in control. So this is the age of empires. This is the sun never sets on the British Empire, this type of idea. But now we have defensive technology like encryption, which is communication, our money, etc. Most of economic life is moving online. So essentially what we're dealing with now is the whole species is coming online. And what the COVID thing did was it got everyone to essentially 5 years of humans transitioning online got pulled forward into 1 year. And so now we're all of a sudden, boomers are using Zoom and all these funny examples, and businesses are never going to be the same again. And so we're going through this transition. And yeah, geographic borders don't matter. We have these ideas, similar people, let's take Bitcoiners. We're all networked online. We share ideas. We have similar values. We want to spend time together. And so how do we go about creating that digital nation state? And Balaji brought up a cool idea where we start online. We build networks, we share ideas, we form philosophies, and we also become wealthy as Bitcoin increases in value. We can't understate that. Bitcoiners need a shitload of resources. So we build networks, build resources, etc. And now all of a sudden we have this group of people. We can start working out what our new life wants to look like. And we have enough resources and enough leverage to crowd fund enough money to go buy Texas, or to go buy California, or some example like that, where now we have physical meat space, which I think would be last. And I just think that's an interesting way to get to the sovereign individual idea. Simultaneously, some nations will fracture, others will start online and then go to meat space.
I think just to your point about our tendency to centralize because we have a brain. I think it also even depends on the scale you look at it, because I think human beings have evolved through pockets of centralization in broader decentralized networks anyway. Whether you look at tribes and cities, nations and nation states, or empires or whatever, they've always been, because it's impossible. Like the globalist dream of a single government, and a 1980, I actually would argue is fundamentally impossible, except maybe in the case of something like China. Now maybe they're technologically, or they will become technologically strong enough to eliminate themselves in the process of, you know, becoming this sanitized version of a big brother state. But I think we can argue that the story of humanity was one of decentralized evolution anyway. It wasn't that there wasn't some you know, global decree of this is how humans will behave. And, you know, despite, you know, the emergence of different empires, as the empires got larger, what happened? The susceptibility to collapse increased. And then that's effectively, that's the same story over and over again, which is that when something gets too large, particularly in any complex system, and life being the most complex of them all, it breaks under its own weight. Simple as that. And then that's why I think this globalist agenda is so antithetical to life itself. And I think Bitcoin, as this objective truth with a capital T, allows us to take on our own subjective reality and almost interact with each other, because we have this common fabric through which we can cooperate, which is, again, it's always existed in some way, shape, or form. Just Bitcoin is the apex version of that, and arguably the version, again, that just I keep coming back to this great filter thing, is it sort of carries us through that. And how we then interact beyond the great filter is an unknown, I think, at this state. You know, whether we go through the examples that you just mentioned then with what Balaji said, or, you know, we fragment into hundreds of thousands of cities, or whatever that looks like, I don't think we know at this stage, but in some way, shape, or form, it's going to be aligned with the reality of nature. And the reality of nature is that you have real individuals who are subjective participants that can make decisions as sovereign individuals as the future progresses. And I think that's going to be, and because, like you kind of said, the cost of attack has increased relative to the cost of defense, that completely changes the incentive structure, or the base incentives for how we interact with other human beings. So it's such a, I don't know, there's so many pockets there we can dive into, but I'll throw this to whoever wants to continue here.
Yeah, I have some thoughts. I think a lot of the things that you guys touched upon are already happening. So I think we already see that so yeah, there are many things. Like, I would say that Bitcoin Twitter is the perfect example of like the first digital nation state. Like, that's the digital nation state idea. As Brandon said, we share a lot of commonalities because we rally around Bitcoin. It's the thing that we want to bring to full fruition. It's the idea that we believe in. It's as Parker Lewis wrote as well, like, Bitcoin is a rallying cry. So it's definitely something like this truth machine, this anchor of truth that everyone can rally behind, and that's what ties us together. And I think there are many other reasons why Bitcoiners get along so nicely in most of the cases, because I think at the current state of the evolution of the Bitcoin organism, the supporters of Bitcoin are of a similar kind, you know. Like, in the very early days, it was all cypherpunks pretty much, you know. And now we're at the state, we're kind of normal people, but still kind of contrarian and disagreeable and outliers, and everyone has like a crazy hobby, and before he got into Bitcoin, he did something else that was completely crazy. And like I always say, we're still before the eternal November that we had in the internet days, you know. Like, everyone else will come in at one point, but we're not there yet. That's also something to celebrate and to be cherished. And as Brandon said as well, you know, like, I really like to look back what you said, I don't know, like 45 minutes ago, with the islands of evolution, and that the turtles on Galapagos, they can't mate with each other anymore. And I think also in the Bitcoin space, we see some funny things that, you know, like, if you're not a Bitcoiner, I don't want to talk to you, because every conversation is like kind of not interesting to me, and you have no idea what's going on anyway. And I would argue this might influence mating behavior as well. You know, like it I don't know, maybe Alex has something to say about that. But all of that is kind of happening, and I'm only like 10% joking, you know, like all I'm saying here, I truly believe this is true, and I experienced it myself, and I know many Bitcoiners have experienced similar things. And what's really important to understand, I think what Alex talked about a lot as well, is you cannot solve any problem in a complex system by top-down rule. Like there are no simple solutions to any problem in a complex system. That's also why like everything the government tries to do to deal with the COVID virus, for example, it's kind of doomed to fail from the beginning. And it's very similar to trying to manage any living complex system. Like we see that's why monocultures fail all the time, you know, like you need to have something like an emergent jungle, and you cannot control it. It kind of has to grow on its own, and that's what's going to be stable. That's what's going to bring prosperity to those that inhabit it, and so on and so forth. And I see a lot of things emerging in the Bitcoin space as well. And one of my favorite examples is memes, for example. You know, like you cannot force a meme. It's just not possible. So all the good memes, they emerge naturally. And I think also the first like clicks, so to speak, if we want to stick with the digital nation state idea, we see that emerge in the Bitcoin space as well. You know, we have, for example, the Taco Labs, we have the 3D print gun people, we have the, you know, like we have the Alex Gladstein free speech money click, and so on and so forth. And everyone, like it fragments already in the Bitcoin space. I think it's even more extreme than that, because it also fragments on the technological level. You know, like you have the core developers, you have the Lightning developers, and so on and so forth. You have people that work on and off ramps mostly, and so on and so forth. So I think it's really interesting to look at that, and you can see these kind of groups of people form already. And I think it's all like the end conclusion or the end state of going all in and just offering yourself to Bitcoin and be like, you know, symbiosis, I'm 100% in, just do with me whatever I want. You will end up meeting your Bitcoin people in meet space as well. And that's what happened, you know, like you meet at conferences, you kind of try to manage to meet up somewhere, like travel restrictions be damned, so to speak. And I see that happening already. And I know that people are already making plans to move to different jurisdictions. As I said before, like a lot of people in the US now are moving to Texas. All the Bitcoiners meet in Texas, and in Europe as well, you know, like there a lot of people move to Portugal, for example. And I wouldn't be surprised if again, it's already happening, but I wouldn't be surprised if in 5 to 10 years from now, we truly have the beginning of the citadel theory, the citadel future, that we, you know, it will be co-working spaces, it will be co-living spaces, it will be just cities where people meet, it will be areas where there is just a lot of Bitcoiners. Because I also believe, you know, the saying that money likes to go where it's treated best. So Bitcoin will like to go where it's treated best. And in turn, Bitcoiners will like to go where they are treated best. And if you're in Canada, for example, and you're a Bitcoiner, you might want to think about moving, because that's becoming a socialist communist dystopia faster than you can say thank you or excuse me.
We must find out what to do with your savings.
That's so terrifying, that woman.
Oh man.
My goodness.
Man, talk about just like next level ignorance, but go ahead, Brendan.
Yeah, I was just going to pull on the thread Gigi mentioned about the monocrop. And I think that's a really, really important analogy here, because the central planning is the monocrop. Bitcoin is the old growth forest.
Yep.
And there's this interesting historical analogy where I think it was in the 50s, we were growing this one specific type of banana. And Dole essentially put it all over the world. That's where the name Banana Republic comes from, because this multinational corporation would go there, buy land from indigenous people, grow bananas. And they had this banana empire. And then they had so much power, they'd sort of like tell the government what to do. And so picture the whole world farming this exclusively one banana. They're literally all clones of the same banana, identical genetics. And what this offered was incredible efficiency. They could just spray the same thing, perfect rows, same process. They all look the same. Consumers are ready for it. And so hyper efficient. But then one day, a single fungi goes, oh, interesting. This banana is everywhere. Maybe I should eat this. And so a fungus evolved and then wiped out the entire banana crop on the entire planet because one organism, one predator came and figured out how to eat it. And so then everyone scrambled and they had to come up with a brand new banana, which is the Cavendish. That's what you see in the grocery stores today. And so we repeated our same mistake. There's one banana being grown. I mean, there's other ones, but one that's commercially grown. And
isn't the Cavendish like basically dead now as well? Like, isn't
it's being attacked by the Panama disease or something? It will be gone probably in 10 years. Yeah.
There you go.
So we're just repeating our same process again. And so to bring this back to Bitcoin, the monocrop that brings you, or let's say fiat, that brings you price stability, right? The dollar is relatively stable priced. But what that also brings is systemic instability. So as soon as there's a shock to the financial markets, the whole thing explodes, right? That's fiat. Bitcoin's the opposite. Bitcoin sacrifices price stability and instead gives us systemic stability. So no matter external shocks to Bitcoin, Bitcoin doesn't matter. It keeps chugging along. All the volatility, all the instability can only go to Bitcoin's price. And so I think basing a system on a systemically stable financial ecosystem makes way more sense than trying to have this unstable system. Our economies are essentially Cavendish bananas, and we need to be building old growth forests.
Dude, that's such a good point, because that kind of lines up with this idea of our subjective individual reality, and that is the thing that actually fluctuates, and that how we then project our subjective reality on this objective thing called Bitcoin. Bitcoin doesn't change, but our interpretation of how we need it, what we need to use it for, etc., that's the thing that actually changes. So in a sense, yeah, that's a really interesting, because that's a symbiosis of the objective and the subjective. Whereas at the moment, we've sort of got it around the wrong fucking way. We kind of try and interpret, like, so governments try and behave subjectively and project objective ideals on all of us subjective individuals. Like, we're all the same. We're all numbers on a spreadsheet. We're all susceptible to COVID. We should all behave this. Like, it's, we're just sort of one homogenous fucking glue, whereas the government internally can be its own subjective thing, which is morally subjective, morally relativistic, probably better termed. They can print whatever money they want, so they can do all this sort of stuff subjective. It's the fucking opposite way around, which I think it's a really powerful analogy there.
Definitely. Good point.
Gigi, do you want to sort of pull on any threads there, man?
Yeah, I would like to maybe to round this off. I would like to bring up one idea that loops back to how the mushroom kind of takes control of the ants, and it makes zombie ants and so on, like the mind virus. And I would like to point out that Bitcoin has, like, in terms of entering into symbiosis with Bitcoin, there are some people that are primed to enter into a symbiotic relationship. Like, if you're open to new ideas, if you, like, historically now, if you're not averse to taking a risk, for example, if you
Raoul Pal would disagree with you.
Yeah, of course. if you're not easily scared, then it's also beneficial to to adopting Bitcoin. And so what I think is interesting, that Bitcoin is such a powerful force that as it expands, like as the mind virus expands, its radius expands as well, and it captures more and more people. And I always, like, I know I must have said it like at least 2,000 times now on different podcasts, but I always think it's super hilarious that you cannot possess Bitcoin, but Bitcoin can take possession of you. And that's what will continue to happen. Like, once you understand this, and once you can see that it truly is like this mind virus, but it's not a nasty one. It's actually like a cleansing one. And I think the reason why it's a cleansing one is that it forces you to unlearn a lot of things. Like it forces you to unlearn a lot of fiat thinking and a lot of things that you took for granted. And I think that's why it's so difficult to accept for some people, because the more entrenched you are in a fiat way of thinking, the harder it is for you to embrace a symbiosis with Bitcoin. But still, Bitcoin is so powerful that it manages to change the minds of people. And we see that over and over and over again. And I think a lot of people are not prepared for a future where more and more like multi-million-dollar CEOs change their mind on Bitcoin. More and more senators change their mind on Bitcoin. More and more people in power change their mind on Bitcoin, and so on and so forth. I'm saying that with some hesitation, because I also think that it won't happen like super, super fast and overnight. But I still think that a lot of people are not prepared, Bitcoin is included, of how quickly things can happen and how quickly like the tide can change as well. And I think we are at the very, very first inning, like the warm up of the first inning of the tide truly changing. And I think once like Bitcoin truly asserts itself and presents itself to the world as this mutually beneficial superorganism that it is, it can happen really quickly that not only individuals, but also corporations and even nation states accept it. And it's, again, like the closer you are to the fiat system and fiat thinking, the harder it will for you to unlearn those ideas and accept it and enter into a symbiotic relationship. So I would expect that we're still at the phase where the outliers come in first. So even if you are a CEO, you have to be kind of crazy like Michael Saylor to, go balls deep and all in at first contact, pretty much. But still, he's a perfect example actually, because he was not convinced by Bitcoin, to put it mildly. And there's this old tweet of his where he basically called it out as a scam, and he changed his mind. So that's how powerful Bitcoin is. And I think we will see. We will see just the spread of this organism again. Like it's built for survival. I have no reason to believe that it will die tomorrow. So it will continue to live block for block. Bitcoin's heart will keep beating, and the only thing it can do is spread. And it spreads it spreads through minds, and in turn it spreads through code, and it duplicates itself on other nodes, and so on and so forth. And the dance continues.
I think one thread that I want to pull on there is this, when we, I guess, submit I don't usually like that word, but we sort of, when we decide to become more symbiotic with Bitcoin, the reason it sort of enhances our lives on an individual level is because we actually become more symbiotic with life itself, because Bitcoin does represent a living thing so closely. And I think that's so important, because I think fiat is just antithetical to life. Fiat is the idea of, the very definition of the word fiat is top down, is by decree. And no such life exists by decree. Like, I just don't think that.
The perfect example of that is now negative interest rate policies.
Yeah.
Like a negative interest rate is like completely nonsensical in the real world. So that's the living proof of what you're saying.
Yeah, exactly. So I think that's why Bitcoin has such a profound effect on people. And we talked about this when you and I were on the call with Breedlove, is this idea of enlightenment through Bitcoin is you sort of, it's not this new discovery in the sense that it gives us, all this new knowledge about how to live, but it actually brings us back to timeless fundamental principles of life, and it brings us back into alignment with that which is living, and that which, as we were sort of like, whilst itself as a life form, it exhibits adaptability, survivability, and this continuation. I think life as a more broad flow has these truths or these principles, which I've got a whole argument about how morals are actually these things that emerge that are symbiotic or aligned with the flow of life, as opposed to what the religionists might say, which is that morals are sort of endowed by God, which I view that almost as a fiat decree, as opposed to an emergent phenomenon where morals are that which is on a collective and individual basis most aligned with life. And if we look at Bitcoin as this thing that is alive, when we come into symbiosis with it, we naturally come into more symbiosis with life itself.
Yeah, and I really like what Huss, the friar, has to say about that. And he was, I think, one of the first people who came to this conclusion. And he said quite a long time ago that Bitcoin is nature. So everything that is happening in Bitcoin is in accordance with nature, because Bitcoin is nature. And that's exactly what you're saying. And it loops back to morals in that sense that, for example, in Bitcoin, there are no thieves allowed. There are no thugs allowed. Like you cannot, the only way to acquire Bitcoin is to get it honestly. Like, generally speaking, of course, you can hack someone, and you can, like the ledger mails, you can force someone or coerce someone to enter their passphrase and so on and so forth. But in generally speaking, if you compare it to fiat money, if you want to have someone's Bitcoin, you will need, like, the only way to make more Bitcoin is to provide something of value to someone else. And there is no coercion. Like you cannot inflate it away. You cannot tax it. Like you cannot enter it. Like you cannot forcibly take it out of my wallet. I have to be willing to give it to you, and I will be willing to give it to you if you provide a useful good or a useful service. And I think all of this to bring it back to what we talked before previously with the nation states and so on. And again, I think we see this play out already. I think we will see a lot of arbitrage going on. Like, if a country is useful to you and it treats your Bitcoin nicely and it treats you as a Bitcoiner nicely, you might be willing to move to that country and pay whatever is necessary in terms of citizenship, in terms of taxes, and so on and so forth. And if not, you have but you have the option to say no. And we did not have that previously, like in the fiat system, you just do not have this option. And so in that sense, the fact that Bitcoin is nature and is operating in accordance to natural law, it gives rise to moral behavior. And I think that's such a fascinating property of adopting Bitcoin and adopting a Bitcoin standard, because as we can see in the Bitcoin space, like, the personal transformations are profound. And I would even guess, even corporations that adopt the Bitcoin standard, I think the transformations of the corporations will be profound as well. But it's still, I guess time will tell. We're at the very beginning of this.
Yeah, man, I want to do an episode now, Bitcoin and morality, because I think that's such a important topic. I've got a couple things here that I want to go through, but before I do, Brendan, do you want to tie this section off before I throw in one last question for you guys, and then we can start to wrap this up?
Yeah, I've got someone here. So going along the thoughts around aligned with life and how Bitcoin resembles natural process and how that's a good thing. There's a fantastic biological analogy here, which is the trophic cascade effect. And I'll explain what that means. So in the American West, the gray wolf was the apex predator. So from all the way from the Arctic down to Mexico was the entire gray wolf zone. And in ecosystems, the apex predator serves many functions. One of them is it keeps the other organisms in check. So an obvious example would be the deer and the elk are food for the wolves. And if the deer and the elk's population becomes too large, just like Malthusian population dynamics, they consume all the food, which then craters the population of those ungulates. So it's actually better for the ungulates if there's some wolves, which thin the herd. And that makes the genetics better also of those ungulates. And so a real life example is that farmers in the American West said, I don't like these wolves because they're eating my sheep. So they said, okay, well, we've got big fiat brains. Let's just kill all the wolves. And then our problems are solved. And then what they found was that, okay, now the ungulates get larger population and disease. They decimate the grasslands. Then the grasslands are destroyed. That removes all the small mammals, which removes the birds. And it has this cascade of negative problems just by removing the apex predator. Okay, now people decide to bring back the apex predator. So they brought the wolf back to Yellowstone. The ungulate population gets under control. The prairies come back, the small organisms, the birds, everything. And now the beavers come back. And beavers, the industrious creatures that they are, they chop down trees, they make dams, they literally move the flow of water through the environment. And so simply by introducing the apex predator, rivers moved. Like that cannot be more, that idea cannot be more profound. Yeah. And it applies directly to what we're talking about here with Bitcoin. So Bitcoin is the apex predator. And if you look through economics, gold was the apex predator for thousands of years, right? Then they essentially demented gold and they replaced that dire wolf with a Pomeranian, which is the fiat system. And what happened? It collapsed. And now Bitcoin is essentially reintroducing the apex predator based in scarcity, based in market principles, instead of this demented, overbred Pomeranian shadow of its former self. And so I think it's time that we bring back the apex predator. And what's going to happen is all kinds of downstream effects, like many of the things we're talking about here.
Man, that's such a, I mean, there's everyone's answer to why Bitcoin fixes this. Seriously, that was such a, that is really like, I mean, there's a lot of people that are skeptical and they sort of hear people say, oh, you know, Bitcoin fixes this. And they're like, oh yeah, that's over optimistic, but it actually does, because it changes. And this is why it's so important to understand how changing root causes has the downstream effect, which you just described then of, you adjust the variable that counts. And yeah, man, that's such a profound point. Hell yeah, baby.
Yeah,
I've actually got that shirt too, somewhere.
Apex predator of money. Shout out to Nick Ward, right? Layer 1 BTC.
Yeah, Nick Ward, that's right. Yeah.
Yep.
Brilliant. All right, gents, there's one thing here that I wanted to throw in before we start to bring this thing to a close, is this idea. I want to make a distinction between, because I think Jimmy Song and Jordan Bush brought this up in the Preachers podcast that I just did. And they sort of talked about how, you know, evolutionary theory can sometimes be viewed as this, you know, cold utilitarian theory, which is, you know, that do that which, you know, gives, you know, one the most benefit, and sort of utilitarian, in my mind, at least when I view it, sort of quickly devolves into, you know, dystopias. Like, and the argument that they used was this idea that Stalin, you know, genuinely worked hard and he genuinely, you know, had this utopian vision. And, you know, what he did was, you know, had some sort of utility, at least in his mind. And that, you know, a lot of the times I think, you know, when people talk about evolutionary ideas, that it gets mixed up with the utilitarian ideal, which I personally like. I hate the idea of optimizing for utility, because I don't think our perception of utility is always aligned with the complexity of life. I think life is way too complex to try and frame within one person's subjective view of what is most utilitarian, because what might be utilitarian to me may not be very utilitarian to you. And so it suffers from the reality of the fact that we are subjectively different. So could you guys sort of riff a little bit on the differences, in, at least in your minds, of evolution or the evolutionary concept versus the utilitarian concept, so that we can sort of differentiate those two? I think that's a really important point to hit on.
I like to think about those things in terms of what's stable over long periods, like what finds a natural equilibrium. And for example, like in trade is a great example, and also other kinds of game theoretic thought experiments. And it's not only thought experiments, it's what's actually happening in the real world. Because from a utilitarian perspective, if I trade with you once, then it might be in my best interest to just rip you off completely. And that's you. If you're a psychopath, that's what you're inclined to do. But the thing is that in the long run, this doesn't work at all, because people talk and they will figure out who is the asshole that's ripping everyone off, and it's just not playing fair. So I think one popular person that has the best grip on this is Jordan Peterson, who talks about that a lot in terms of iterated games. That if you, what you want to have is you want to play the meta game. You want to play fair. You want to maximize the benefit over the long run, which includes your future self, and which includes your family, which includes society in general, which includes those people that are near to you. And so maximizing just for your own individual benefit might not be the best strategy. In fact, it is not the best strategy. And so because it just is not stable over long periods of time. Like if you're only acting selfishly all the time, then I like selfishly in the sense that what you want right now in this instance, ignoring like your future self and ignoring all the second and third order effects of your decision and so on and so forth, like that's not a good strategy. And so I think what nature does as well, like what ecosystems do that are stable, like the jungle that we talked about, for example, or the, everything that works like a jungle, so to speak, it by definition is a stable ecosystem that existed for a long period of time. So by definition, what it's doing is working. And I think again, like it's playing in a sense the meta game, you know, like it's
I think I was just going to pull on one thing there. I think selfishness is a tough word to place in there, at least for me, because I think acting in selfish interest gets confused with acting in a high time preference modality, which I actually would argue is not very selfish, because it actually fucks you up even more. So I think
of course it probably was not the perfect word to use.
It's a tough one, but I just sort of wanted to pull on that sort of as a differentiation, because I think most people just view selfishness in the wrong context, in the sense that you then should place XYZ in front of you, because at the end of the day, by you playing that metagame that you described, then you do that in self-interest anyway, because you want to lengthen the time frame across which you will have benefit, and this is sort of where time preference seeps in, is that yes, you can act utilitarian for the moment, but what downstream impact does that have on you? And was that, I mean, maybe we need to make a differentiation here between authentic, natural, low time preference selfishness versus blind, stupid, ignorant selfishness, which I think are two different things. But I think the variable there is not the selfishness. I think the variable there is the morals that constrain selfishness. And again, those morals, are they aligned with life, or are they incongruent with life and these metagames that you just described? I think that's I think it's just a really important piece of nuance there, because I think a lot of people, particularly I guess from the feedback that I got from this podcast recently, is that a lot of people seem to think that morals are something that have been given to us by a higher power, and I find it hard to ascribe to that idea. I think morals are something that are emergent because of exactly what you just mentioned then, Gigi.
Yeah, and that's also what Peterson, for example, points out by pointing. I forget the name of the biologist now, but he studied rats a lot, and basically, when rats play, they wrestle basically, and you can see that this is an iterated game, because they wrestle over and over again, and if one rat just smashes the other one because it's stronger every single time, then the smaller rat will stop playing with him, and so that's not an equilibrated state. And so what's going to happen is that you let the little guy win for a couple of rounds maybe, and then the game continues. And I think like that's the same idea. That's already a moral behavior, and the same idea is true in trade as well. Like because you have been a business partner of mine for a long time, I might eat a loss because circumstances just are stupid now, and I know we will have a lot of trades, like a lot of games in the future. So I can afford to now, for this one instance, just take the short end of the stick, and that's just the way it is. And in the next iteration of the game, so to speak, it will be different. And I think that's a very compelling argument of the evolutionary emergent, like that morals emerged out of those play behavior, out of those iterated games. And a book recommendation that I give often to other Bitcoiners is Finite and Infinite Games, which touches on similar ideas as well. So what you want to play is an infinite game. You don't want to play a finite game, and that's basically the same idea. You want to win the meta game. You want to be the rat that keeps playing all the time because other rats want to play with it. So I think that's a very compelling idea.
I love that. So I think that wraps up for at least for evolutionary versus utilitarian from your side. I love that. Brandon, what's your sort of viewpoint on differentiating between evolutionary versus utilitarian?
Yeah, so I see the utilitarian side as sort of a command and control or central planning. Again, bringing up themes we've discussed a bunch here, but on the good side, it's efficient, but on the downside, it's really fragile. Seeking utility over all else. And so you lead to this over-optimized just-in-time economy. And again, efficient, but as soon as there's some disruption, there's all these issues. Like, for example, COVID came and then the US realized, wow, we don't even produce medicine here, or we don't produce something else here. And so that's sort of the finite game, where on the other side, you have evolution, which is always reacting and changing to its environment. You distribute control to the edge versus in the ivory tower. And that creates a living, breathing symbiosis with this environment. Again, most adaptable equals long-term success. And that's just sort of high level how I see that. And then speaking about selfishness or self-interest, I think this is a really important point. And we are naturally self-interested. We have our genes that we need to pass on. So it makes sense for us to care about ourselves and our kin. And this applies to the economy as well, where entrepreneurs, they take risk and most fail. Most waste capital, their own time, and most become worse off because of it. But a few succeed. And the ones who do succeed benefit everyone. Okay, so we need to support the few to take risk. And we need regulations that are not overburdensome. We need markets that are free to enable the creative spirit of individual tinkerers, to enable all these economic experiments. And the few that do good, they produce benefit for everyone. And it doesn't matter what the motivations are of those individuals. They could be saying, I want to become rich, and this is the best way to do it. And if so, fine, we should support that. But whatever it is, we want that selfish, individual, self-interested thing, because I do believe that's the primary motivation for creating a large company. You could have some childhood trauma that you need to prove yourself, and you express that out through your business, and then you create Amazon. And well, we can argue whether or not Amazon's good or bad for the world, but my point is value was created because of it. And speaking about finite and infinite games, Naval has a really nice quote here. It's something like, play long-term games with long-term people. And if you can't see yourself working with someone forever, don't work with them for a day. And I think that's a really good framing here, because most value in life comes from compounding interest. It's from playing the long-term game, or the infinite game, the longest game you can possibly play. And so, I think that also supports morality, which is that, you want to support the people, or you want to be with the people that you're going to spend a long time with and long term. And so that would reinforce the morality of doing that, because it is successful.
Yeah. I 100% agree. And I think like the other couple notes here I've got is just, I made a distinction between, having a creator versus existing in the process of creating. And I think that's an interesting distinction where, I sort of sit on the latter version there is, I still can't ascribe to the idea that there is some sort of divine creator that has given us, a set of morals and a way to behave or something like that. So I love and I really align with the idea of nature and natural law and the process of creating that's evolutionary in nature versus the divine version. But I also see and I don't want to make this another religious podcast because I just did that, but I'm really curious to sort of hear your guys' feedback on where you find or if you do, the usefulness in, because I see a lot of Bitcoiners are, strong Christians. And, the funny thing is throughout the conversation, basically me, Jimmy, and the guys we were finishing our fucking sentences. So we both agreed on things. It was just sort of how we got to this, how how we got to the same kind of North Star was different, you know. So my feeling about it was much more evolutionary in nature, and kind of like what we've discussed then is, you know, this idea that morals evolve over time because they're most aligned with, you know, that which is adaptable and continual, and the, you know, the long game, the meta game, etc., the infinite game. Whereas, you know, a lot of the thought from the Christian side, and, you know, all other religions, as far as I can tell, is that these are divine principles that have been bestowed upon us, which I guess get us to the same point in some sense. But I just question the authenticity of you know, one narrative versus the other. So I guess maybe we can tie off on you guys giving me your feedback on that before.
I'll start.
Okay.
I'll do as best as I can after,
Okay.
after 2.5 hours in or so. So you guys know the T-shirt that says like Democrat and it's crossed through, and Republican and it's crossed through, and Libertarian and it's crossed through, and it just says Bitcoiner.
Yep.
So I need it. Yeah, exactly. It's like conservative, progressive, libertarian, Bitcoin. Yeah, I got it wrong, but I got the basic idea right. I'm gonna need a T-shirt that says like atheist and it's crossed through, Christian and it's crossed through, and so on and so forth. And at the end, it just says Bitcoiner. So
Bitcoiner,
that's where I'm standing religiously speaking. So I don't know. It's a very touchy subject. I don't have strong opinions currently. I had them in the past.
Yep.
But I think I went through something that a lot of psychonauts go through as well. That you're like a diehard atheist and a militant atheist for like 10 years, and then you're tripping on ayahuasca or something for a couple of hours, and it just changes your mind for some reason. So yeah, that's all I'm gonna say about that. But I'd be interested in hearing Brandon's thoughts on that.
Yeah, so a couple of funny points here. One, speaking about morals, morality, I think what needs to always be addressed when discussing morality is that humans, our DNA, our instincts, our fears, hopes, insecurities, etc., that evolved during a period where we were living in small hunter-gatherer tribes. And so we have all this software, this latent programming from a previous era that is incongruent with modern society. And so, like, for example, we're not like we feel jealous when we see our neighbor growing more food than us. And we look over the fence and we see, oh, damn, my buddy, he's growing twice as many turnips. I wonder how. That makes me feel bad. I should figure out how. Okay, so then I learn and now I'm better off, right? So that's evolutionary advantage in that small group. Now, today, if I can scroll on Instagram and see curated lives of the quote coolest people around the world, that makes me feel bad. But I can't do anything about it. So it's actually a negative trait. And so that's just one example of evolutionary biology here. But with morality, if you screw over one of the 100 or 150 people in your tribe, you might get away with it once. But if you do that a few times, they're going to realize, wow, Brandon's immoral. We don't want him in the group, and they kick him out. And so we have this, the morality in us to maintain social cohesion with our kin. And so I just think that lens always needs to be present when speaking about morality. And then with regards to religion, yeah, similar story to Gigi. I grew up in a Lutheran Christian family, went to church on Sundays, did all that. Then in my like 18 to 23-year-old phase, I was a very militant atheist. Then I got into psychedelics and I go, okay, maybe I shouldn't be so confident in my opinions. I'm a little bit more open to the mysteries. There's things I cannot explain. And maybe humans are incapable of understanding the complexities of the universe. And now I'm at a point where I hold that to be true. And simultaneously, I see the benefits of religious institutions. They actually do probably hold society together in a fundamentally useful way. You can get rid of all the dogma. I don't subscribe to any of that, but there is some fundamental truths and wisdom through these traditions. Just the fact that they survived this long means they're useful. And yeah, maybe they do make people feel good. Maybe believing in a higher purpose is actually really good for humans. I think that's true. And now we have this gaping hole in society, a religion-sized hole. And it causes us to project that religious impulse onto things like nation state, my culture, my sports team, capitalism, socialism, whatever. And I don't think that those are as useful North Stars for society. And so I do see Bitcoin as, we've talked about in a religious sense many times, but it does fundamentally have those characteristics of something larger than ourselves. Nick Carter's essay on the 12th birthday of Bitcoin, he talks about the cathedral, where in ancient time, you're building this cathedral and it might take 3 generations, but you still go brick by brick and you know full well that you will not be there to complete the project. And yet we do it anyways. And so Bitcoin is kind of like that. It's not going to be complete in any of our lifetime, yet we're happy to work on it. And I think that is a very religious impulse. It is larger than ourselves. And that also speaks to why individuals who interact with Bitcoin become more moral. We remove the individual insecurity, neuroticism, like the dark side of humans when they don't have purpose. That sort of disappears when you have something to strive for that's bigger and more meaningful and more purposeful. And then compounding on that, you find a bunch of other people who are on a similar path. And again, it provides more purpose in a society that appears to have none. And so, yeah, I'm with you, Gigi. We do need Christian, atheists, panpsychism, Bitcoiner, or whatever. I think that's fantastic.
You can also see the snow crash mind virus nature of Bitcoin at work here, because basically what you said in the last 3 minutes, I said 2 weeks ago on a German podcast in German. And I think you're not speaking German, right? So you didn't hear that. I referenced Nick Carter's piece as well with same thing, same article reference, same thing. I'll remind me to clip that out, and all the German speaking people can verify that actually. So
that's
amen to that. Amen to that.
That's hilarious. I think we are all very much in a, like, you know, although my journey might have been a little bit different, but yeah, militant atheist after 18, and then, you know, beliefs that were much more loosely held as I grew up. I only actually tried psychedelics for the first time this year, believe it or not. That was my first experiment with anything. In fact, I didn't even try cannabis until my 30th birthday. My sister spiked the fucking birthday cookies, a little shit, and which was kind of funny.
Not recommended.
So I didn't. So yes, I'm a bit of a newbie. All I've tried is psychedelics now. Well, mushroom psilocybin a couple times now, and cannabis. But yeah, I kind of came back around to appreciating religion as a concept about kind of in my mid or second half of my 20s, particularly studying spiral dynamics as a concept. I'd highly recommend that. Don Beck and Claire Graves' work, and this idea of how, you know, society, humans, individuals, and groups of individuals evolve through value frameworks. And I seem to keep mentioning this fucking book and this concept in every podcast now, but I need to do an article about it. But I think it's that shirt. Nick Ward, if you're listening, make us the fucking shirt, please. You've got 3 people here who are going to buy it. Not to mention everyone who's listening. So there's that. And I think also, you just, as Brandon was talking, something hit me. I was like, morality, I think, is that which is most not only aligned with life, but also I think there's a direct correlation between morality and time preference. In fact, I would argue that the lower your time preference, the higher your morality, and also the higher the morality, the greater the propensity for the evolution of civilization. And as we increase time preference, we actually degenerate that whole process and we fuck it up, which is, I think, antithetical to morality and all that sort of stuff. So for me, I guess where I kind of end up ending on the argument of religion and God and all that sort of stuff, I think it has inherently a tendency to lower time preference, and to be potentially a civilizing force in some sense. There's multiple examples of, I guess, the institutionalization of religion and God, which become antithetical to life. We don't even need to go through the examples of that, but it's such a broad concept, and thank you guys for sort of giving me your feedback on that. I think we all sit in a very similar boat on that one. Is there anything else you guys want to touch there, or shall we wrap this up with some final comments?
I'm ready to wrap this up.
I know, yeah, poor Gigi's dying. All right, so let's let's wrap this up. I would love to connect with you guys again to do a part two. I think there's, I know for the audience, before we kicked off, Brandon sent me and Gigi around some notes. And I say that in air quotes because some notes was 10 pages worth of notes for us to review on this talk. So I think we can probably do a whole 10 episodes on this topic. But look, I just want to throw this quickly over to Gigi and Brandon to wrap up some final thoughts before we say goodbye for the night.
Yeah, I think everyone who has listened to this and has no idea what we're talking about, I think it's worth revisiting the original material that sparked this idea and everything that built up on it, that Bitcoin is a new form of life. So read the original writing by Ralph Merkle, read the series that Brandon wrote, which is excellent. Dan Held also wrote about it in his Planting Bitcoin series. My work is the Proof of Life series, and some articles surrounding this, like Bitcoin's gravity, has very similar ideas in it. And I'm sure there are others, but if you're a floating head and have sunglasses on, I have no way of take notes or read notes or do anything. So I'll kick it over to Brandon to go through the whole list of material.
Yes, I like notes. Okay, a couple things to wrap up. Yes, go read the source material. We just sort of scratched the surface of these ideas. Gigi has an impressive catalog. I can't wait for the new book. Read 21 Lessons, read Proof of Life, read Gravity, read all these. Same with Alex. There's so much good content here to go deeper into these things. And, I would say as sort of like parting thoughts, for some reason, I think a lot of people neglect biology for some reason, but biology is like probably the most complex science we have. And we really don't know that much about it yet. We're still sort of poking at it in the mud. And so give biology a second chance. You're going to be humbled if you actually start to learn about it because it's so incredibly complicated. And also from a practical standpoint, these biological systems have been iterating for billions of years. And so through that, they figured out strategies that work extremely well through design or through efficiency gains or through different processes, architecture, chemical engineering process. All this stuff is already solved by biology. We just are too brutish to extract the wisdom. And so there's a field called biomimicry, which is essentially mimicking biology to create useful tools. Like the helicopter wing was designed through biology. There's the bullet train was looking at the beak of a bird flying into water. And you can look at the shape and the aerodynamics of that. So there's all these mysteries already solved. We just have to go find them. And so go do that. Study up on the Bitcoin stuff and come say hello on Twitter at Quittem. And yeah, I thought this was an amazing conversation. I would love to do it again. Yeah, thanks guys.
Yeah, absolutely. I also want to give a shout out to Guy Swan here. So when I was first deciding to do this, obviously the first person that came to mind was Brandon, and then the next person that came to mind was Gigi. But then I thought, shit, me and Gigi just did one together, and then I was like, oh, I should get Guy on, and then we set up this. I think this is just so, I guess, representative of the Bitcoin community is that I created just a group chat, and I was like, all right, who are we going to pick to come on with Brandon? And none of us could decide, but it was just great because no one got butthurt, and I think that's just such a, good story to tie this off with. And the reason Gigi ended up getting picked was I flipped a coin, and it was a euro coin, and clearly it was bias towards Gigi, and Gigi ended up on the thing. So shout out to Guy Swan. We missed you, but dude, we're definitely going to jam. So gentlemen, thank you very, 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 very much for this. I learned a lot on this episode. Honestly, I think I had multiple moments of breakthrough, and it's always a pleasure to chat with both of you. And actually, Brandon, this is sort of the first time we've really connected over a conversation. So really appreciate you coming on, man.
Echo those thoughts wholeheartedly. I learned a ton, and then there's some inflation with my notes. It started with 6 pages, and now it's 9 as I'm taking notes for future reference. So,
for sure,
Yeah.
I'll chuck a bunch of those notes into the show notes anyway for everyone to sort of dig into. Gigi, you were going to say?
Great conversation, and I can't wait to see how our thinking about Bitcoin evolves. And yeah, I can't wait to do this again someday. And yeah, thanks for having me and hosting this.
Absolute pleasure, guys. Adios.
Later, guys.
Bye bye.